Welcome to the NJQP podcast. My name is Isaac Kamens. This is a bi-weekly podcast where my friend Jess O'Brien and I discuss internal martial arts, Qigong, and meditation. This week we're going to talk about the natural boxing master Wan Lai Sheng and his connection to Liu Hung Chieh. We talk about Wang's life and his martial arts and a little bit about his meditation and his philosophy. Then we move to the final chapters of the Energy Gates book, and we talk about advice on finding a teacher and choosing a style of Qigong and things to look out for, things to keep in mind when you practice, that sort of stuff. We have one more episode before we take a break before season 2. During the break, we're going to be releasing some of our interviews that we did over the last year. We're going to start a Xingyi audio training program on the 5 elements in Santi along with the beginning of season 2. So check out the Patreon for that, as well as check out our Instagram. We're going to be posting some of the articles that we used over the season. Yeah, and then season 2, we're going to be looking at some of Leo's teachers and their teachers and sort of tracing back the lineage and talking a bit about, how the whole thing kind of got shaped throughout history. We're also going to take a look at some of the other Neigong components, not as in depth as we did with Energy Gates, but just to kind of give people a view of the whole thing. So keep an eye out for that and enjoy the episode, and thanks for listening.
Welcome back to the NJQP podcast with Isaac and Jess. Today we'll be continuing our reading of Opening the Energy Gates of Your Body, Gain Lifelong Vitality by B.K. Francis. Master Liu Hung Chieh plays a big part in this book. The author meets him when he's an elderly man in Beijing in the 1980s. But his lifetime had taken place all through the 20th century in China and had lived through many of the great events that marked the history of martial arts. One of the good friends of Master Liu Hung Chieh was the famous martial arts teacher Wan Lai Sheng. He lives from 1902 to 1992. At the tournament in 1928 with Liu Hung Chieh was his friend Wan Lai Sheng. And so that's pulling from the power of internal martial arts. But that's the only person who's described in that book as a friend and a colleague of Liu Hung Chieh. So, just taking from that one little line. And so we're going to look a little bit at the history of Wan Lai Sheng here. So about Wan Lai Sheng, from an article here, born in 1902 in Hubei, China, Grandmaster Wan started practicing martial arts at a very young age. He graduated from the National Beijing Agricultural University and studied under famous martial artists such as Du Xinwu, the famous master of Ziramen, the natural boxing. Devoted to the study of martial arts, Taoism, Qigong, and Chinese medicine, Grandmaster Wan integrated the ideology of Zhuangzi into martial arts and founded the philosophy and principles for Ziramen. So Ziramen is the martial art known as natural boxing that Wan Lai Sheng was a teacher of. Leveraging on the strengths of the different styles he had studied, Grandmaster Wan developed and enhanced the skills and techniques of Ziramen, greatly promoting the art and bringing it to an unprecedented new level. And he goes on to describe how he participated in the National Martial Arts Competition in 1928, where, again, Liu Hung Chieh was also a participant in that, and they knew each other there. Later on, Grandmaster Wan went on to be a high-level director of the Guoshuguan Military Martial Arts Academy that was promoted in China at that time. And I would speculate that when Liu Hung Chieh became a teacher in that same organization, that it possibly could have been through his connections with Master Wan Lai Sheng, or as they had both been in the 1928 tournament.
Well, they also they had the same 6 combinations boxing teacher. So probably since they were the same age, they probably trained there around the same time. So likely that's where they met. And then, it sounds like they stayed friends throughout.
So when they were doing their training in their youth, that's around 1910, 1912 area probably.
Yeah, and I'm sure the people that Wan trained Bagua and Xingyi with on the side were probably some of the same people that Liu was training with. I mean, it was, it's a small group of people. So
clearly they were running in the same circles of martial artists.
Yeah. But he's one of these guys that's just superstar of the martial art world.
He's a legend, exactly. So I wanted to read a little bit about Master Wan from the book Esoteric Warriors by Alex Cosma. Wan is famous throughout China for his abilities as a fighter. In his early 20s, he wrote a martial arts book which revealed many of the secrets of internal boxing and Taoist Qigong. And for years afterward, masters would turn up at his doorsteps and challenge him to fight, wondering how such a young man could dare to reveal such things. Wan never refused a challenge, and by all accounts never lost a match. And eventually people stopped coming to fight him, and he became a renowned teacher. In fact, he was champion of the first all-China martial arts tournament in the early 1920s. He had many teachers. He studied the Six Harmony Shaolin system with Liu Hung Chieh, but his main teacher was the almost legendary Du Xingwu, who passed on to Wan the Ziramen, or natural boxing system. Wan also studied the 3 other internal martial arts. As an example of his depth of research into these methods, he knew 80 different ways of doing the single palm change of Bagua, that's the first time I've heard of anybody having 80 different versions. One of the things here that's interesting is this Ziramen martial art that Master Wang was famous for. It's known as natural boxing. The natural style of fighting is a northern internal style of kung fu that is taught in conjunction with Qigong breathing techniques. The style traces its lineage to dwarf Shu, who is based on ancient Taoist philosophy. Du Xinwu, the next bearer of the lineage, served as a bodyguard to Sun Yat-sen, then the provisional president of the Republic of China. Du Xinwu then imparted his knowledge of natural boxing to his eldest son and to Wan Lai Sheng. So it traces to a dwarf.
Yeah, I mean that's like Xingyi also traces to
Doesn't Xingyi also?
According to Robert W. Smith's book, Du Xingwu actually defeated Chen Miancheng. I don't know in what context.
They fight? Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but one of the mentions there is that they.
I want to look that up. That sounds interesting. Yeah. Its nature boxing is based on ancient Taoist philosophy, traditional Chinese medicine, and most importantly, the philosophy of 1 and 0. I don't know what that is, but the main principle is to overwhelm the opponent by striking continuously using every part of the body. Ziramen makes use of 4 fundamental techniques: Tun, contraction; Tu, expansion; Fu, floating; and Chun, sinking. These techniques are generally expressed through the movement of the spine. So I've never seen Ziramen in action. I've only read about it. I've seen some videos of it, but it seems like a pretty cool.
So, Tun Tu is a way of saying open close, right? And then there's the up and down. So he's basically describing the same
floating and sinking. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are the same. Those are the up, down, forward, back of Tai Chi.
Sure.
I think it's the same. Essentially, same energies. They just have a slightly different way of describing. I mean, when you look at him move, it's from a Tai Chi or Bagua context, it looks like he's got a little bit of everything. He's got a little bit of the spirally, squirrely stuff from Bagua. He's got the slow, heavy, legs of Tai Chi. There's a little bit of the Xingyi half-stepping in there.
So here's one last little quote here. Unlike many internal martial arts, Ziramen's early training focuses on hard physical exertion, with the internal aspects only becoming apparent in the practice later in training. The style consists of over 80 extended forms and hundreds of short combination drills. Training to exhaustion in these methods forces the student to cease using muscular force and move in a relaxed manner. So you exhaust yourself to the point of getting that whipping, less tight but looser striking just from making your arms so tired.
There's videos of Wan, and there's one where he's doing all these things where he's like hitting rocks and doing all those palm rubbing exercises, and he does those things where you tap on yourself with like balled up thing of twigs. It's just like all that iron shit stuff. Yeah. So there's there's a whole external training to it, which I think that's useful if you're going to have a system that tries to encompass everything is challenging. So
yeah, check this out. Here the thing says they use Pai Da Gong techniques, which involve striking and being struck with various pieces of equipment. posts, sandbags, iron balls. And here it says an item of equipment apparently unique to Ziramen is the striking cart, a wooden cart filled with stones, which is moved by shoves and strikes.
Oof.
Oh, that's sweet. So one more thing we wanted to look at about Master Wan Lai Sheng was he published a number of books that talked about his various philosophies of training. And one here that's translated into English, his book on meditation. We thought there were quite a few really interesting quotes in here, but we just have time to take a look at this one here. Observe your elixir field even when you are not sitting. An elixir field referring to what we call dantian in the lower belly. Here it says, do not forget this principle. When walking, standing, sitting, or lying down, your mind remains focused on your elixir field. The spot an inch or so below your navel is called the elixir field. The meaning being that this is where elixir is produced. Do so even when you sleep, during which you can bend your arms and legs and lay on your side, which is better for settling your mind. There is a Taoist saying, it is not important whether or not you have found the way. What is important is that you have learned to sleep like a dog. So that's interesting. So that's that comfortableness, I think, that we're always seeking to find, where you keep your lower dantian in your focus, even when you're standing, sitting, moving, and as far as even lying down.
I like the piece about that it continues, right? It's not just something you do and then you stop. That there's this awareness 24/7 of that, that field.
That speaks to the focus on the lower dantian that a lot of internal martial arts have. Sounds like it's also a part of his meditation, and Ziramen as well, most likely.
Well, the stuff he describes in his Taoist meditation is pretty similar to the stuff that Bruce teaches from Liu Hung Chieh. So there's a lot of similarities in what they do. I think the form might be different, but it's definitely, you can tell the philosophy is the same, right? You have to tap into this natural flow and the Tao, and use that in order to do your meditation or your martial arts, not try to force it through intent or will or strength.
I like that idea. That naturalness is going to be your strength rather than forcing it to happen. You're going to follow this natural pattern and outthink the opponent that way.
That's the whole tenet of the 70% rule, right? Or it's that idea of like, it's through relaxation, through letting go, that you can achieve power, right? Not the power's already there. You just have to let it out. You don't have to force anything to happen.
Here's a piece from Esoteric Warriors about the history of the art that Wan Lai Sheng learned. It says here, Ziramen is a very difficult system to find. Up until Wan Lai Sheng, it was passed down from one master to one disciple at a time. We know that a Taoist named Little Shu taught it to Du Xingwu, after an encounter in which the extremely tall and skilled Du was toppled by the dwarf Shu. Du Xingwu, who was famous for his light-bodied Qigong and point hitting, among other things, taught only Wan Lai Sheng. So that's, this famous fighter, Du Xingwu, had been toppled by a dwarf martial arts master, and so that's how Ziramen came to be. All of Ziramen is based on Taoist meditation. For the fighting ideas, you have key concepts. You will look at an opponent's body sectors or gates, and by the gates you can have 2 or 3 ways to enter. Each time you can do it in one motion, like defending and attacking simultaneously. Then you can go to 2, 3, or 4, up to 8 motions. You build up these quick combinations of hitting and kicking. Then you apply it with a partner to make it real. So that's a little bit about the training method of Ziramen.
Yeah, it kind of speaks to that combination, or the thing about stepping in. It sounds a lot like Xingyi, where it's all one motion, right? But then once you get there, you've got 8 directions, which sounds a lot like Bagua. So it's a little bit of both there. It's kind of cool.
It sounds like this guy was deeply wound in this current of internal martial arts that was boiling in Beijing in China in the 1910s, 20s, 30s.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's one thing that sometimes gets lost nowadays because everybody wants to have their style be the best. But like back then, I think it was like these guys were just like they were junkies for martial arts, right? So if you found someone who had it, like even if they had just one technique that was good, you might go hang out with the guy for a little while and just to get that one technique, and then you move on. And I remember Bruce saying one time that he quote collected techniques like people collected teapots, right? That martial art techniques were his fetish, and that's what he would try to find was a technique he'd never seen before or had, even if it wasn't the greatest technique out there, just if it was different or uh, used some, interesting sort of body movement that he hadn't seen before, right? So I think guys like Leo and Wong, I mean, they were, practice martial arts of any kind for 70 years and tell me it doesn't do something to you, right? I mean, so it's like that these guys were just, geniuses when it came to martial arts.
Yeah, their standard of training was pretty high. So that's why it's so fun to look back on these histories and look back at these teachers and the little threads that connect all the different schools that exist today. It's really a small world in the long run.
For sure.
So we're continuing in the section Appendix B, searching for a qualified teacher. Do you have anything you want to throw in on that?
The first thing people look for is what's closest to me, right? Like what's easiest. Then they look for, do I like this person? Do I actually, can I spend an hour in the same room with this guy and actually like, not doesn't make my skin crawl kind of thing. And then the final thing is after they've been there a while, they decide, okay, is this guy actually any good? Because when you're a beginner, you don't know anything. So it's hard to judge your teacher. Once you been practicing for a while, it's a little easier to judge. Then it becomes about what does it actually do for you? And do you feel better when you practice it? And how much better do you feel when you're doing that one versus some other version, right? Like, so if you've only ever done one system, it's hard to judge whether or not that system is good or bad. But that's separate from the individual. The individual is like, are they an honest person? Are they presenting the information in an honest way? And I think the best thing is that if you ask them a question and they don't know the answer, that they say, I don't know, rather than try to give you some bullshit answer.
As a teacher, you want to have authority, but you got to be honest about these things.
Anyone that says they know everything, you have to be suspicious of them right away. And then it's a question of, if they say they know one thing well, that's usually a good sign that they're on the right track, right? Like if somebody says, okay, I've done this one thing for a long time and this is what I teach, you have a good sense of what they're doing, right? If they say, okay, well, I did this for 5 weeks and then I did this for 5 weeks and then I studied with this guy for a year and then I went over here for 5 years and then I did this one, you have no idea what they're presenting to you is of any kind of
consistency,
right? It could just be what they've put together after years of practice. So that's another, indicator.
Sure, and I guess like you're saying, big promises kind of are what turn me off. If this is gonna fix everything, you're never gonna age, all your organs are gonna work perfectly, you're gonna, like you've got to be a little realistic. And when we've taught, we always tend to be like, don't look at this to be like the magic bullet or whatever. It's good to have high expectations for working on your health, but you can't just put it all into one thing, basically.
There's no magic pill. Like, unfortunately, there's no single thing yet developed by mankind that will cure all diseases, fix all problems, right? All this does is give you a outlet for some of them, right? So
looking at the next section here, Appendix C, the importance of correct Qigong practice. This is also a series of advices about how to practice that I think we've covered pretty thoroughly. You don't want to force anything, that you want to practice safely and carefully and not over stress your nervous system. He makes the point about yogic practices work too well, and that's an interesting one where he's not trying to put down the other system. He's saying you could potentially overcharge yourself if you don't have a teacher there to help you make it work. So as a solo practice, pranayama might be too powerful, might be too effective.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest critique I've heard Bruce give of other is it's not that they don't work. It's that they work so well that if you don't have someone there monitoring what's happening, something can go wrong, right? And so the danger in a lot of practice isn't that they don't get energy moving or they don't activate the chi or they don't do X, Y, or Z, or even that they aren't good martial arts, right? Like, I mean, some martial arts are amazing, but they make you psychotic, right? Like some Qigong systems are out of this world, fantastically complicated of all this chi movement. But if you practice it, you get sick, you won't feel good. And it's like, so it may not just fit your system. So you have to kind of find one that works for you. I mean, I have a friend who uh he said, he could never do yang style tai chi because every time he did it, he didn't like it. It didn't make him feel good. Other styles of tai chi or other forms of qigong were just fine. And so I think on some level it's like you got to trust your body and just don't do anything that feels bad. If it feels wrong, even if your teacher's telling you to do it, yeah, you don't have to do it. You're paying them. Remember that. Like, that's the thing I would always go back to is like, I'm paying this person to learn something. If they're telling me to do something that I don't think is safe, like, I don't have to do it. I can make the choice to sit back and, or I can do half of it, or I can, approach it slowly, like at my own pace. And any teacher that makes you do something, and I mean makes you do, I don't mean suggests that you do it, I mean forces you to do something that you aren't comfortable with, like, nope, dumb, that guy's gone.
I'm just so glancing through this chapter to see if there were any other little bits and pieces that are interesting. There's one really telling paragraph here that I thought was interesting. Taoists stress the spiritual framework of Qigong. He said that many of the teachers that he met wouldn't teach him the real stuff, or they would teach him incorrectly, but the Taoists were beyond cultural and personal differences. They found it admirable that a Westerner would take the time and trouble to learn their language and to be able to study something that they considered very important. The Taoists are generally highly developed spiritually and considered the development of spiritual life to transcend time, space, and culture. So he credits Taoist teachers for a lot of the Qigong in this book. And I think it's fair to say there's different types. There's Buddhist, there's, scholarly, there's medical, and so on. But martial Qigong, he specifically says that Taoist Qigong was the one that he, as a foreigner, they were actually cool to him. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the main reasons I feel blessed to have met Bruce is that I didn't have to go and learn another language and travel to another country and, deal with all the things that come with doing that to learn this stuff. I had to, drive 30 minutes to cross a bridge, right? It was pretty easy to get to. So, I think that anyone that would go through that to learn this stuff, I think, that to me is admirable for sure. But I think his experience was definitely that people like Leo and the Taoists that he met were much more accepting of him wanting to learn than some of the other people. But I don't know if that was necessarily about Taoist or if it was about just the time, the people were still very guarded about foreigners.
So just to round out that chapter, there's a lot of looking at, comparing Qigong system. And just things to look out for. Too much Qi can be painful. Watch out for sexual Qigong. It's a little too easy to cause things to be, forced in a bad way. Packing Qi where you're breathing super hard. Those
Yeah,
ones all
you know,
sound a little tough, as well as vibrating. He brings up as
right. And
something that
again,
can go wrong.
these are all things that um, if you start doing vibrating stuff, if you do it lightly, it's fine. It doesn't. But if you start really amping it up, there's a point where you realize, okay, I'm starting to push it, right? And that's where you have to say, okay, I'm not going to go past this point. I'm just going to do a little bit of this. And I think that's the danger of some of these practices. It isn't the practice that's dangerous. It's that people don't have the discipline to stop themselves when they get to their 70%.
Right. And one of his famous stories he'll sometimes tell here is, in a particularly raucous martial arts incident in Japan, I found I was breaking bones left and right and was almost unable to stop myself. At this point, I realized this practice was making me crazy, removing compassion from my makeup, and I stopped. When I later returned to Taiwan a few years later, I found I had been practicing a form of Fujian white crane, and that had sort of that over vibration had led to this feeling crazy from it.
Yeah, no, I mean that's something I've let's see. I know two people that I personally have met. Well, actually, no. I know four people that I've met who through doing martial arts or qigong have either gone to the point of like no return uh or meaning they ended their life or they've gotten very close because they destabilized their conscious mind, right? So um one guy showed up at my house. I hadn't seen him for months, and he's like, hey, can you do this thing for me? And I'm like, man, I don't think I'm going to do that thing for you. And it turns out he'd been doing all this weird fasting and, meditating with the full moon and just really juicing himself up and getting way too much acupuncture and all of this other stuff. And Bruce and a couple other people had to go and like basically put the guy back together. And from what I could tell, he was never quite the same after that. Um, So, another guy did a bunch of full moon meditation, and his was less severe. He just kind of turned into an asshole for a couple months. Uh, Another guy did some really hardcore um, fighting martial art stuff and kind of went off the deep end. So, there are these cautionary tales. I think that's why Bruce is as hardcore about the safety stuff as he is, because he's seeing the worst of it, right? He's seen people just lose it. And he came, I think he came pretty close. Sounds like he came pretty close himself. So I think it's important to, but I also think that's rare. I mean, what I will say is I think you have to be pretty good at it to hurt yourself. So it's again, I don't think that any of these practices are inherently dangerous. I think it's what you do with them, right? It's like a gun, I mean, to take an extreme example, a gun by itself is not dangerous. A gun in the hands of an unstable person is quite dangerous. And so it has to do with, the person wielding it, not necessarily the technology, right? So, um, I think that's where it again, just comes back to have a good teacher, have someone guiding you. Don't go too far off on your own. And if things start to get weird, stop what you're doing and then find someone who knows about how to fix people who have these sorts of problems. I remember Bruce talking about a couple people who had done weird chi practices and showed up and had he had to help them kind of fix their uh, themselves from it. And I met one of the guys, and uh, I wouldn't say he was particularly stable. I would say he was affected by what he'd been through, and it's sort of like, do you want to go through that just because you might get a little bit more power in your martial arts or X, Y?
Yeah, I mean, just I guess to me, it kind of boils down to being realistic. It's like don't don't think that you're going to try to make miracles happen and hand yourself over to someone else's telling you what you should do, or what's good for you. How does it feel to you? Are you a better person? Are you feeling better? Are you stronger, springier? Something. What's coming out of it? Because if you're feeling results that feel good to you, you're probably on the right track. Now, if they're making you feel hot and sweaty or something, or see and hear weird stuff, yeah, no, that's not what you want to go towards. And you know, I think he's got some good advice in the book of just stick to what you feel is right, and don't try to take any shortcuts or look for miracles or push yourself super hard. Just slow but steady, and you'll get a lot of benefit from it.
Like I said, I think it's like anything. It's like choosing a teacher in music or whatever the sports. You just have to find someone who you feel that they can guide you, and that they don't have some other motive behind it.
Yeah.
Beware the teacher who drives a Mercedes, right? Like, if your martial arts teacher's doing really well and he's only got 4 students, you might want to consider, like, what's going on here. But yeah, I think on the whole, most people that teach this stuff are genuinely good people, and you don't really need to worry too much about that. The bigger thing is what you're saying, which is, does it make you feel better? Do you enjoy it when you're doing it? And, do you like the people you're doing it with? I mean,
Yeah.
I definitely would not have stuck around Bruce's school if there weren't some of the people that were there, because, if it had been a confrontational group of people, I just wouldn't have put up with it. That's not my nature, right? But people were really welcoming, even as they're slapping you in the face. It's like you're getting knocked down to the ground, and like they're welcoming you back up with a hug, and you're like, all right, this is cool. I can dig this.
Yeah, I'm not like super competitive either. I'm looking for a supportive learning environment. But
Yeah.
some other people need a competition based belt rankings. I mean, it's what you want to do. You're just try a few things out, go around and find
Well,
something that really suits you.
if you've never done, it's unlikely that anybody listening to this has never done, at 35 episodes in, has never done Qigong. But if you've never done Qigong, don't just go to the closest guy to you. Try a couple people, and do the one that you actually feel like you get something from. It's a personal thing. And then over time, you might want something more that person doesn't have, and you can find someone else that does. But it's a
Journey.
journey. Exactly.
Well said. Hey, one other thing I was going to bring up is that our next podcast will be the last episode of this first season that we've been on. And it's been quite a journey. It's been, wow. I just was reflecting back on all the different conversations we've had, all the different teachers we profiled, and I've learned a lot, like looking up different biographies and the
Yeah.
different book translations that we've been digging into. That's been a lot of fun.
It's been a hell of a year. That's
I mean, here we are at the end of 2020.
We're actually recording this on January 1st, 2021.
Yeah.
But we do have plans to do another season. It sounds like we're gonna do profiles of a lot of Liu Hung Chieh's teachers and other people. So that should be a lot of
Look out
fun.
for that.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, opening the energy gates of your body, it's just looking back at how influential this book was on me when I first got it. I really took it to heart and put a lot of training into it, and was repaid, and found it that this set's one of the best that I've ever practiced. And damn, the book itself is a really good book too. And I'm glad we did this and really went page by page through this thing and explored a lot of these ideas we've been training for years and talking about for years. So it was good to get it all down in one place.
Yeah, it's nice to get it on record, as they say. And I do think, if again, it's probably fairly obvious, but both of us feel that this set is very useful. And I mean, for me, it's the foundation of everything I do, everything I teach. So, that is what it is.
Yeah. No, it's been good to go through it one little piece at a time, and I'm glad people have gotten to hear your advice, especially on the practice advice
Well,
from
I'm
the
glad you
master.
talked me into doing it. Let's.
Yeah. Well, cheers, bro.
All
It's
right,
been a
brother.
good
All right, take care.
next time.
Yep. Hey, folks. Isaac again. Just to say thanks for listening. Hope you've been enjoying this season. We've been having a great time doing it. We're looking forward to season 2. So, check out the Patreon during the break. Check out the Instagram. Uh, Leave a review on iTunes. Like and subscribe. Tell a friend and take care of yourself. All right. Thanks again for listening.